This morning, I'd like to start with Psalm 23. Now, we read this a lot, and you know this well. So this morning, I just invite you maybe just to take it as a gift as I read it to you. Maybe just close your eyes and receive it. Don't try to figure it all out, but just pay attention to where God's speaking to you. What's resonating with you as I read this for us. The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along right paths for his name's sakes. And even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil. For you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. If you were here 2 weeks ago, I introduced a practice of submission, kind of owning right away that the word submission can kind of feel a little strange, like sort of that camel clutch, like a wrestler grabbing hold of you and forcing you into submission, and kind of reminding us that that's not the way that God works. God doesn't force and coerce. God is a God who comes alongside and is always inviting, wooing, being in conversation with us to bring us along. So when I think of submission, I think of it more about surrendering my agenda, to surrender my will, to surrender my strategies for living, and to be curious about what God wants to be doing, to be curious about where God is acting and moving and breathing and inviting and leading me. And we saw that Jesus, in his life, submits to all that God is doing through him, all that the Father who sends him is doing, even in obedience to death on the cross, becoming a servant of all, even suggesting that submission is about becoming a servant. And then at the end, I invited us to pray through Father Thomas Keating's welcoming prayer. And I invited you to be doing that for 2 weeks, and I hope you have. I, in my time away, have been praying that prayer as well. And it's a prayer when we welcome everything. We welcome the people, the conditions, the emotions, the feelings, and then we say we want to let go of things like power and control. We want to let go of things like our need for esteem and approval and pleasure. We want to let go of safety and security, and what we are doing is we're saying we want to let go of our desire to change any situation, condition, person, or ourselves, and we want to be open to what God is doing in us and around us and through us. And then afterwards, if you remember, I made a joke because I was about to get on a plane to go to Germany, a 10 or 12-hour flight with connections, and I made the joke, yeah, now that I've prayed this, just wait and see. I'm going to have to really see how this goes. Well, I made it to my first leg in Detroit. I got to meet up with the team except one guy. He had gone ahead to Oktoberfest, so he wasn't there. We met everybody, and then as we're about to board, and we hear that ominous voice over the loudspeaker, Flight 22 to Munich has been delayed. We are having engine problems. So we said, all right. About 20 minutes later, it looks like that engine is really a problem. We're going to send you vouchers. So we got vouchers. And then about an hour later, we think we have that engine fixed now. And so we're going to go take it for a test flight. 2 hours later, hey, the airplane seems to be working. We're going to start boarding now. 5 minutes later, oh, hold up on that. The captain said, no, we can't board the plane because if we fly that to Munich now, the pilots will time out before they get to Munich. So the flight is canceled. You can find your vouchers for hotels and more food in your email or text message. Now, my friend Jerry, who's leading the trip, you can imagine the look on his face. But me, who's practicing the welcome prayer, I'm like, well, what are you going to do? We're on a pilgrimage, right? This is what we're saying. I'm not going to try to change any condition or anything. So he's a little bit grumpy with me because I got a smile on my face. I'm like, whatever. We go back to the room. Part of my secret thing, the Steelers are playing, so I get to watch them. But they were lousy, so I just welcomed the lousy Steelers that night. Had a great night's sleep. The next morning, we woke up and we adapted. We went for an 8-mile hike in Detroit from our hotel room to this park. We Ubered back to the airport, used the rest of our food vouchers, flight boards on time, everything's great. About 45 minutes into the flight, the captain comes over. Yes, we're glad you're flying with us tonight on Delta, but we're going to have to land this plane in JFK because we're not too sure if the engine that was fixed the other night can actually make it over the Atlantic. Now, if you are like every other person on the airport, you're saying, well, wait a second. Couldn't you have gotten us a new plane? You're a major airline. Or couldn't you have fixed that plane overnight or while we were hiking in Detroit? I just smiled and said, all right. I don't think it's a coincidence that I preached about submission. How do I submit? How do I let go? So the way that really turns out is that we arrive in Munich about 3 hours late. It's about noon, and by the time we get our euros, and by the time we get train tickets, and then take 2 train rides to the place we're going to meet our Oktoberfested friend and pick him up and begin where we should be on the pilgrimage. We get there, it's about 4 o'clock. But the thing about it is we have over 12 miles ahead of us of walking. So if you do the math, that's like over 4 hours of walking to do. And it's about to get dark. We're all tired. In order to get that second flight, I lost my seat with leg room, and I had to sit back in a regular layman's place with crowded, so most people don't think about it, but me in that plane is like this, and then you sleep and you're like this. So I didn't sleep. The food wasn't very good. I didn't eat the breakfast cannoli. I mean, a breakfast cannoli, that's just too much. So I didn't eat that. We get on this plane. Now we have 4 hours in front of us. It's going to get dark. I keep saying to my friend Jerry, I think we should probably find a supermarket because I think we're going to need food for that next 5 hours of walking that we're about to do. No, we'll be okay. We'll be okay. So we get walking. It's getting dark, and it starts raining on us. We all have our gear. We're walking through the rain. I kid you not. Off to the right is a McDonald's. I'm like, Jerry, there it is. Let's just go get a McDonald's, man, and we'll be able to make it there. No. We are not eating McDonald's on this pilgrimage. I'm like, all right. All right, I'm not going to try to change again, Jerry, because I'm praying this welcoming prayer. I'm submitting to what God's doing. And so we just keep walking in the rain, in the dark, along this path. Jerry keeps saying, I've never walked this path in the dark before. I'm like, all right. So finally, we get to this church we've been going to, and we get these things called Pilgerstempels, and they're pilgrim stamps. And you go in, and there's this church, and it's Roman Catholic because the Romans were in that part of Germany, and it's a little bit warmer in there. But we're sitting around, and now the debate begins. Well, should we just get an Uber the rest of the way? Because if we get to where we're going in this rural town of Germany, the restaurant that we're going to might not be open, and there certainly won't be any supermarkets. That was one idea. Another guy said, well, what we should do is we should just maybe think about that we're not going to have dinner tonight, and we're just going to have to fast. To which I said, I don't think that's a very good idea. Because I didn't eat that breakfast cannoli. I'm not telling anybody that I'm lightheaded at this point. And then not to mention, as I asked for prayer for my foot that was hurting me as I was getting ready for this trip, both feet are killing me. I'm walking now, and so one guy brings out what he calls the Pilgrim's Pantry. It's this bottle. It's got all kinds of candy in it. I can't eat candy because it's got corn syrup. That'll just screw up my foot that likes to get gout. And so I'm like, oh, what are we going to do? Then he brings out these waffles because he was in Munich, and there's waffle cookies, and they have hazelnut in them. And he said, here, why don't you eat these? I'm like, I will. So I ate that thing, and I didn't know the guy very well, so I kept looking at him like, do is it really okay that I eat all these? So I ate that whole thing of cookies, and another guy said, let's just pick up our bags and we'll go the last 4 miles. I'm like, all right. Back out into the rain, we're walking, but I have this thing, and I also had some electrolytes, and off we go, and we get there. Now, all along the way, right, we're freezing cold at this point. We are tired. We haven't slept all day. We get to this place, and it's a little weird looking, and it's a restaurant. And we walk in the door, and it's like this office building, but then through this door where we went, it's like this restaurant. And there's all these German people sitting around at tables. It's not very big. You got one couple, and we got all these guys over here drinking beer, and then you had this couple over here. And we walk into the place, and the guy who's the restaurant welcomes us. He says, oh, I have a room for you. Come, bring all your wet clothes, and you can dry off all your clothes in there. And he went and got a heater, and he dried our clothes for us, and we walked in, and right there before us, right, the table was set for us. We were able to order drinks, and we were able to pretzels, and I had the best Thai vegetable curry I've ever had there, and I'm not too sure if it was the cook or the fact that I was starving. But like right in there, I'm walking along, and I'm thinking of this, because each time we would walk, and this is where Psalm 23 comes in, but I'm not quite ready for the pictures, but each time before we walk, the first 30 minutes we do in silence. So I'm walking and I'm praying this welcoming prayer because it's a good prayer, but I also have memorized Psalm 23. Now I'm in Germany, and at first it's beautiful before it starts raining. So I'm like, the Lord does provide. Look at this, we're here finally. There's green pastures. We're walking along this canal, there's still waters. Already, my prayer of having a refreshed soul is beginning to be answered. We're walking up this path, the right path for God's name and God's sake. And then I'm in this dark valley, literally freezing, starving, lightheaded, feet hurting. But I'm not fearing any of that because God is with me, and I sense that. So this is this prayer I'm taking along with me. And then we walk into this room, and this German fella who knows English and had just been to Colorado is the most hospitable restaurant owner you can imagine. And he welcomes us in and puts this table before us in the presence of our enemies. Our cups were overflowing. Our heads were anointed with oil. It was glorious. All of this thing of just saying, I'm going to submit instead to allowing God to shepherd me. I'm going to allow God to bless me. I'm going to allow God to refresh me and anoint my head with oil. Now, I'm trying to figure out where I'm going from here. But even this idea of anoint my head with oil, Gabriel asked me yesterday, Dad, what does that really mean? So I think it means blessing, but it also means hospitality. A host would anoint a guest's head with perfumed oil to show honor and welcome. And in this way, the phrase can be interpreted as God welcoming guests. And this guy welcomed us and gave us a place to dry our clothes. Or it could be used as a shepherd. A shepherd would be used to oil to treat the wounds on the sheep. That God is putting his healing presence upon us. And it can just be simply a blessing of God's goodness over us and upon us. And that night we were experiencing that. Now, I have the first quote here from a theologian. Did I have those after those? Let's go back to those. I'll do those, Arlene. Here we are, green pastures. Next, green pastures. This is where we're walking along, and literally green pastures. Still water. So as it's wet and as my feet are hurting the entire time, God keeps providing us. God keeps shepherding me and saying, here's still water. I lead you more still water. I mean, it's really easy to pray the welcoming prayer and accept your conditions when you're in the middle of southern Germany walking into the Swiss Alps. At one point, I knew your prayers were with me. It was on this day I put on my hokas and I'm walking and I'm out in front, and I know your prayers were with me because my right foot, which was hurting, was no longer hurting. It was my left foot now that was just absolutely killing me. And I'm like, oh, they didn't know that they needed to pray for the left one too. And we turned our phones off for the walk every day, so I couldn't call you and let you know to start praying for that. But here, look at that. Throughout the time, it was just this idea that as I'm walking through the struggle, and it was hard work, we walked over 100 miles. We had 20 pounds on our back. But amidst all this, here's God saying, but don't forget, I provide for you. I'm going to lead you into green pastures and still waters. Now, I have this quote that I want to share with you this morning, and then we'll finish up. This is from William Temple. There is only one sin, he says, and it is the characteristic of the whole world. It is the self-will which prefers my way to God's, which puts me in the center where only God is and should be in place. I love that prayer because it reminds me that even on this pilgrimage, it was about allowing myself to be shepherded and led by God. My foot was good enough, it hurt, my body was hurting and aching, but none of that seemed to really matter. We just kept walking. He provided fellowship for me. He provided, I'm in Germany, for goodness sakes, walking and enduring. And that didn't mean that we didn't find ourselves the last 3 miles just exhausted and in pain. But the idea is, how do I just let God be the one who leads me and God be at the center rather than my needs and my complaints and the way I want things to be? And so that was a great lesson for me. Now, Richard Foster defines submission is the spiritual discipline that frees us from the everlasting burden of always needing to get our own way. In submission, we're learning to hold things lightly. So as I began to reflect on submission for this week, I just had to laugh because that was our time. It was about holding things lightly. But there was a freedom that I experienced, a liberty that I experienced because I didn't have to have it my way. I was just accepting it the way that it was coming to me and submitting to that. When you're with 7 other dudes, that's a good practice because I didn't have to have it my way. I didn't have to lead and just submitting to that. But there's a freedom and a liberty. And that's at the heart of spiritual disciplines. And it's the heart of submission, is that when we hand this over to God, we find a liberty where we no longer have that heavy burden of always having to have it our way. We don't like to hear that, though, because we want it our way. We've been told we can have it our way. But submission is saying, what does it look like to allow God to shepherd us, to provide for us, to lead us, to prepare a table when God's ready to prepare a table for us? Where do you struggle to allow God to shepherd you? Where do you find yourself resisting God as a shepherd? So I invite you into this journey of how do we adopt the lifestyle of Jesus, to allow ourselves to submit and to trust the leading of the triune God, just as Jesus did, to submit and to take on this posture. So this week, if you look at your insert, I have 2 sort of assignments. One is keep reading, going through the welcoming prayer. If you don't have it, there will be a copy on the back for you, or you can look it up on our website. And the second one is just to practice the prayer that we prayed this morning during our prayer. What are you holding on to? What are you trying to control? Who are you trying to change? Where do you want security and comfort? And how do you just open your hands and say, Good Shepherd, shepherd me, lead me, guide me. Let me trust that you'll prepare a table before me, that you anoint my head, that you refresh my soul, that my cup overflows because of you. And I can let go of that. I can let go of the leading. I can let go of the scurrying about to make things happen. I can let go of having to force things to my agenda and to my way. And I can let you lead. I can let you be the shepherd. Amen.